Hello, dear listeners. Welcome again to the S4HANA podcast and welcome to this third episode. I'm Faisal, SAP consultant at PwC.
And I'm Thorsten, partner at PwC and leading the SAP practice in Belgium and the European Center of Excellence for Sub-Strategy.
Thorsten, hi again. Why is it important to differentiate the types of SAP customers when talking about S4HANA transformations?
Faisal, that's actually a pretty good question because this defines nothing less than the context of where your journey starts. And in some cases, it also determines the ambition of the objectives that a company is pursuing when going to an S4HANA system. But also it defines the constraints that need to be taken into account. So basically, what we see quite often is that a customer usually goes through such a transformation once in their career, maybe twice, if they change organizations. But that they usually have the picture of the way how they perceived it is exactly how it always goes. And actually, the opposite is true, that every customer needs to write their own book. And in order to see which kind of book that is, it makes very much sense to first understand who I am and with whom can I compare myself. So it becomes pretty tangible if we look maybe at different dimensions, how we can classify these companies that use today an SAP solution. So one of the really obvious criteria is the size of the organization, because we will come to another size later on. So the size of the organization that an SAP ERP system is using starts usually with, let's say, 100 million euro of annual revenue. These are like the smaller companies. Below that, we even see also companies that switch to other packages, more lightweight packages. But as of 100 million, multiple sites, maybe also in different countries present, there usually SAP becomes a candidate that we then see. So that being said, we have like the smaller companies as one of the groups. So where we usually had in the past also smaller budgets. Well, and if you have smaller budgets, that also means you can spend less money to customize your system. And that means when you upgrade to an S4HANA system, you have a less hustle. Very often this connect is a bit forgotten, but it's actually a pretty funny one. I have even a customer who had only a couple €100,000 available to implement it and basically changed their whole organization to make it fit to the way SAP is working. And of course, if I want to move then to S4HANA, a lot of things are very predictable. Another element is also, if you have a small organization, usually we see that a lot of business functions are actually centralized. So if you want to change something, you have to align only with few people. Only few people need to go through the changes, and the rest is actually quite operational. So also there, a small company, of course, will be easier to implement an S4 system. But we also see at smaller companies with few users, for example, a couple hundred users maybe, we see also there that sometimes these systems are quite old. So a small company doesn't automatically mean that things are easy, because they might have gone through a long legacy of potential acquisitions in the past, but also different developers who have gone over the system, different strategies. So just because a company is small doesn't necessarily mean that you are safe of uncomfortable surprises. Well, and I think it goes without saying that if you have a bigger company, that very often means that also your system size is much bigger. No? You also tend to have much less standardized processes. People run finance and especially then also, for example, sales different in country by country, or also continent by continent. And then you have basically many different implementations in one. You have many different processes in one. You have different ways how you look at data, how you maintain data, and all that is then in one box. And this one box in bigger companies is then connected to many, many different satellite systems to make that work. Because let's be honest, there is no SAP system which is isolated somewhere sitting in a data center. They come usually with many connections to other systems that make an end-to-end process flow. Yeah, and what was the advantage at a smaller company becomes the disadvantage at a bigger company. Usually the budgets are pretty high, and that means also a lot of consultants were able to program very customized solutions. We also speak there from so-called set code. Most of the codings from customers is starting with set, or some also with Y, or specific name cases, but this set code, this custom code, can become a headache when going to S4HANA, that it doesn't fit. In the meantime, we have pretty cool tools that can help with that. But in the beginning, this was also quite a difficult part to bring that code then on the new platform if you still wanted to use it. And then, of course, bigger companies usually also have a different global footprint. And that means not only that you have to follow the localization of these different countries, but that means also that you have teams throughout the globe, and you need to align with these teams. You need to test much more. You have very individual cases which are deviating from the general idea how certain things are working. The organizations as such are much more complex. And of course, also the degree of the customization of the system itself is much bigger. All these elements that I just mentioned are huge effort drivers in S4. So certainly the size of a company is really influencing a lot the S4HANA transformation journey. So we see here that if you have a similar scope from a smaller and a large company, it's easily a factor of 5 that then in terms of budget or also effort, this transformation can differentiate from a smaller company.
Mentioning the size of a company, what about the industry? Is this also something people has to consider?
Yeah, industry is an interesting one because a lot of times I see that customers themselves, they feel it is really important for an S4 transformation to have people on board with industry knowledge. But it turns out that many of the challenges, like 80% of the challenges, are very similar also across the industries. And that sometimes within an industry, there are more difference than for example, with a similar sized company in different industries. So industry, in my opinion, with a couple of exceptions that we'll just dive into, is actually less of a topic there. It is only what we can see that the more conservative industries, like, for example, the finance industry, is tending also to be slower in the adoption of the S4HANA. So if we just look at the market, I mentioned it earlier in one of the earlier episodes, the adoption rate, you will see, for example, in the finance industry, an even lower adoption rate, because they are much more, let's say, interested in solving the headaches around their huge banking or insurance solutions than to replace the back office finance system, where they are doing some procurement of some desks or computers or iPhones. For them, it's much more important to focus on how do they get their old mainframes out of the organization and replace that with an agile IT solution for their core business. Another industry that is quite, let's say, differentiating is all the industries that are very much regulated. We see here, for example, pharma, which need to follow the GXP requirements. If you have that, then this, of course, makes a difference also in an S4 transformation. Similar also to the defense industry, where we see, for example, in the US, the ITAR regulation. Also, that comes as an, let's say, additional complexity driver. And then, of course, finance that is facing finance industry also facing multiple regulations that need to be taken into account when going to S4HANA. So bottom line is actually the industry plays much less of a role when segmenting the S4 transformation, but you should actually not forget to onboard the people who have done already a move into S4HANA in regulated industries if you are yourself with your company subject to regulations.
You have discussed size, you have discussed industry, but do you also see another differentiating criteria that helps to assess how easy or challenging an S4HANA transformation would become?
Yeah, and actually there are three other differentiating criteria coming to my mind. One is the functional coverage. So we basically see SAP customers that are like wall-to-wall SAP. So there you find basically every functionality in the SAP system is used. And that, of course, has a much higher likelihood that some of these functionalities will change in S4 or even disappear in S4. So that's certainly one part. We have on the other hand side then the, let's say, ones which are only using finance and procurement, a very small functional scope. For them, it's arguably much easier to move to S4. Something that is maybe surprising, maybe not, is how old is that system that has been implemented? Systems that have been implemented in the last 10 years usually are easier to handle than our bespoken old-timers who have gone through different upgrades or still contain old functionality that are not in S4, not S4 compatible. Like, for example, people using classic ledger still instead of the new general ledger that is needed in order to move to S4HANA. So system age certainly is one of the questions I'm asking quite early in order to basically picture whether in an upgrade, if we go for an upgrade, we will later hear also of Bluefield or Brownfield for the upgrade itself. There, the system age is definitely a decisive factor. Well, and last but not least, we had the organizational size. Also, the system size is either an advantage if you have a smaller system or can become quite a big challenge. So bigger systems usually are much more effort intensive. So you need to foresee much more work, much more effort for fixing activities in reconciling data errors. But also the upgrade itself is more challenging to fit into a downtime weekend. So as of a certain size, you need to basically use very advanced technologies that come for quite a cost ticket, quite a price ticket. So we then hear of things like near zero downtime or zero downtime, which in fact partly then also require parallel system landscapes. And all that costs a lot of money, comes with a lot of complexity. And so here, this is, let's say, the last one, the system size that also makes a big difference when approaching such an S4 transformation.
Thanks a lot, Torsten. It was really fascinating to hear that. But to summarize for our listeners, when assessing what a company has in front of them for the S4HANA transformation, criteria like the following are relevant: company size, industry of that the company operates in, functional coverage by the legacy SAP ERP, system age, and system size. Let's round off this episode with that. I want to thank the listeners again, and I want to ask them to hit the subscribe button, share it with whoever that might be interested, and you will be updated when the next episode will be available. Torsten, what can we expect for the next episode?
Yeah, so the next episode we will actually dive into more the current market, where we are operating in the market. What about the resources? What about the deadlines that I mentioned? How strict are they supposed to be taken into account? So a whole lot of, let's say, constraints that you should be aware of when embarking on such a journey. So that's going to be it. Faisal, thanks a lot for having here this conversation, and so much looking forward to the next one.
Yes, thank you for coming, Torsten.